Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. We are getting ready to record episode number 95 here in the studio of Mike in the Midwest. Let's do this. It's been so crazy. I haven't been able to get to it earlier this week, but it's time. I've been ready. Just haven't had the time, but now we do. We still have 20 minutes. So let's get cracking. See what we can do. Let's get to the feedback. Here we go. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 95 already of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the amazing patrons just like you of the Be Our Guest podcast. We're recording this show live in the Be Our Guest podcast studios in lovely, and it is lovely today, St. Peters, Missouri, about 21 miles west of the Gateway Arch in lovely St. Charles County, Missouri, right along the banks of the Missouri River. If you want to check us out on Google Maps, it's a beautiful part of the country. We actually have wine country down the road, about 5 miles down the road on Missouri Highway 94. If you want to check that out, maybe we'll do an episode on that here so soon. We're developing a whole section. There's a whole new development coming to an area, like I said, about 5 miles west of where we live. And they're looking to develop this with golf courses and new wineries and all kinds of tourism to rival California. And we do have some wineries, like I said, already established out there. It's in some towns called Augusta and Dutso and Defiance. There's some towns in Missouri where it's beautiful area right on the bluffs of the Missouri River. But they're really looking to make that into something. So if you're ever looking for a place to go here in the Midwest, look at our Missouri wine country right here by the Be Our Guest podcast studios in St. Charles County, Missouri. But anyway, we're here on a Thursday. Hope you are doing well. It's good to be back. And as always, I always have to say thank you so very much for your support of the Be Our Guest podcast here on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Thanks for allowing us to put out the Be Our Guest podcast. As I always say, I love doing the show. I know that Pam, Ricky, and Scott love doing the show, but I know that they don't love the show like I love the show. When I get to do the podcast, that is my toy. I know, like my grandpa, speaking of like Mike in the Midwest stories, let's just jump in. That's really what this podcast is all about. Growing up, my grandpa had a lot of hobbies. He liked to make stuff out in his garage. So my grandpa, Rallman, that I've kind of mentioned on the show over the, time we've done these podcasts, his house was about 5 minutes away from my house growing up. You had to go across Florissant Road, which was a 4-lane road. So I really couldn't go across it until I was about, 8 or 9 years old on my bicycle. But eventually I did, and I was fine. We'd go over there every Sunday after church. My grandpa was a deacon in the church. My dad was a deacon in the church. But my grandpa's job was that he was an usher at church every Sunday. So he would, we had 3 services every Sunday. We had an 8 o'clock, a 9:30, and a 10:45. And my grandpa, after the 10:45 service, would stand at the door as folks left church, and he would shake every person's hand that went out the door, because obviously people could go out. We had like probably 5 different doors you could go out of our church growing up. It was the First Baptist Church of Ferguson. But he would stand there until the last person left, and he would shake your hand as you left. And if you're a visitor, he'd thank you for coming to our church. And if you're a regular, he'd thank you and, always exchange a story or two and ask you how your week was and so forth. That was my grandpa. He loved people. But one of the things my grandpa loved over the years, my grandpa loved MGBs. Now, if you don't know what an MGB is, if you're younger, an MGB was kind of like a Mazda Miata, and you might not even know what that is at this point, which is kind of sad. It was a little sports car that was built in Britain. And these things were popular in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you've ever seen Austin Powers, kind of looks like the Austin Powers car. So my grandpa, over his lifetime, had 7 different MGBs of some sort. He also had Jeep Wranglers. Now, I've said many times on this podcast, my grandpa was one of my heroes in life. He was a great man. So is my dad. And so what do I drive right now? I drive a Jeep Wrangler, and that's the only thing I've driven since the year 2000. I've had 2 Wranglers, and I love it. It's a great car. It's a convertible. You can take the doors off. It's kind of like a sports car. It's kind of like a truck. It's got a back seat. It's very practical. It's very fun. But anyway, my grandpa had, I think he said 7, my dad or somebody told me he had 7 different MGs. One, they were sports cars, so they were fun. They were little coupes. They're really little. If you've never seen an MG, they were tiny. They were rather inexpensive from what I can tell, because again, they were kind of gone by the time, my time came around. But, he would buy these cars and just kinda tinker with them and fix them up. He used to drive MGs from St. Louis to Florida. My grandpa didn't go to Disney World, but he would go down to, like, Sarasota. My grandpa was a wanderer. He would drive many times to Nova Scotia. In the fall of the year with my grandma, they got a Buick Regal one time, and they used to take that thing every fall to up to see the color. They would always say, "We wanna see the colors change." So in the fall, they would drive up the East Coast, Nova Scotia, and their biggest thing is they'd always bring me back some grape jelly from Nova Scotia, and I'll tell you what, that grape jelly, I've never had grape jelly that good in my life since. This was, like, in high school. But they were wanderers, they loved to go places, but I always heard the story about my grandpa driving to Florida in an MGB. Now this one, because there's a picture of him in it, actually, it was a green one, like a pea green MGB. And it was cold when he left St. Louis. So it was like, I don't know if it was like spring of the year, but it was obviously he drove it to Florida because it was going to be warm when he got there. But if you know what an MGB is, they one of the accessories you could get for an MGB was something called a tonneau cover, which is it's basically it's not a top, but again, an MGB was a coupe, so it only had 2 seats. So you would put this tonneau cover over it, and it would cover the seats and the dashboard. So it's like if you wanted to not keep the top down, you don't have to put up the top because it was a huge hassle to put up the top on an MG. So you would cover this thing up with a tonneau cover, but it had a zipper down the middle between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. And so what you could do is you could leave the tonneau cover on the vehicle and unzip only the driver's side, and you could peel back the driver's side. You could get in and drive it with the passenger side of the tonneau cover still covered. So it looked like the cover was over the passenger side. The back, there's a little back, it wasn't a back seat, but it was a little spot where the top went behind you, and it would stay covered. And here was the trick, because long story short, my first car was an MGB. It was bright orange. My grandpa and I, we bought it for $500, didn't run. We bought it from a place actually right down the road from where I live now, which was out in the country when I was a kid. We bought it when I was 10. We fixed it up, and I drove that sucker forever. My uncle still has it down in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. I got to get it from him. It's not running. I'd like to get that'd be my ultimate goal, is to get that thing and fix it back up and get it running again. It's bright orange MGB 1971. It was a great car. I mean, not practical. It wasn't a great car in the fact that it always broke down. MGs have 2 batteries, and they're located behind the seats under where the top goes. So if your battery goes dead, and they always did, it was so hard to jump. No storage space, very unreliable, had a choke, you had to pull out the start. 100 reasons why an MGB was not the car to have. Sits about 7 millimeters off the ground. So when you hit a bump, you're always bottoming out, but it was a fun car. I mean, when you're 16, you're riding in a Miata, like a MGB. It was like having a Miata. It was like in a sports car. I mean, it was the bomb. It was the bomb. Anyway, tonneau cover. So if you just zipped out the driver's side of the tonneau cover, even if it was cold, say it could be like 40, 50 degrees, you could kick the heat on in that MG and put the tonneau cover, peel the tonneau cover back. So you'd be driving this MGB with the top down in pretty chilly weather. But the thing was, your body is under the cover, like, because all that heat, because this thing had a good heater. You'd be sitting in like a hot box because it would stay under that tonneau cover. You would be warm as a chicken in like in like an oven, and you're just chilling. Everybody's looking at you like, look at that crazy person with the top down, and you didn't care. You felt great. I mean, your face got a little chilly because it was obviously catching the wind, but it was one of those things. Like my grandpa, that was his hobby. He loved cruising around in his MGs, and this is the longest way to get back to this about the podcast. But the podcast is my fun thing. Like my grandpa had his MGs and tinkering with them and driving them and fixing them. That's how I feel about the podcast. Every Monday when I get to call up Ricky and Pam and Scott, and we get to talk about Disney for a couple of hours, and I get to edit the shows, and I get to post them, and then I get to interact throughout the week with folks that listen to them, and people email like, oh, I listened to that show and you said this, and it brought back this kind of memory from my trip 7 years ago. That is the good stuff. And it's because of your support that I get to do that. So thank you for allowing this guy here in Missouri, for being on my line, as they say in hockey, for setting me up, for passing the puck to me and allowing me to play this game, to have this much fun. because I couldn't do it without you. And your support really does help get this all done. So thank you for being a part of the Be Our Guest podcast team, a crucial part, and for setting me up to be able to do all this fun stuff. And I hope you always enjoy the shows when they come out. I know they're not anything super important, especially these shows. I promise you, you're not patronizing the Mike in the Midwest podcast. This is just a bunch of nonsense that I try to come up with. And I struggle for these kind of topics because they're off the wall. But sometimes maybe we'll share a memory. And I love hearing what you guys have as far as feedback when it comes to these really weird topics. Also, shout out to patron Greg, who works at the National Weather Service. Telling me kind of his stories this week. We got to kind of connect about one of the topics. Because I talked about the weather and how we were supposed to have this wicked storm last week and it never really materialized, but I was still thankful that the weather people got us all prepared. You know, they're always tweeting out like, you know, today's the day to figure out where your safe place is in your house, where you're going to go in the basement. You know, schools were deciding action plans if the storms were going to run through or not. You know, are we going to dismiss early? We're going to hold the kids until the storms pass. At least it made us weather aware. And so we kind of talked about that on last week's show. Well, Greg reached out and he's one of the people, I thought this was so cool, is that he has the decision to decide when these severe thunderstorm warnings and greater go out to certain areas. Like somebody has to make that call. When that alarm goes off on your cell phone, that it is time. It is now, you know, it's not just a thunderstorm anymore. It is now time to seek shelter. That is on the shoulders of Greg and his team. And he's a listener of our show. So we could talk about that. And I thanked him for that service because that is something that keeps many, many people safe. And, you know, this is Mike in the Midwest. That is crucial to the folks here in this part of the country. I know Dr. Kai is one of our listeners. He's down in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I mean, they have just gotten storm after storm roll through their part of the country. Just seems like, you know, Northeast Arkansas has just been hammered this year, time after time. And so we appreciate those folks that work in weather forecasting and keeping us safe. So it was great to make that connection. Because again, I've said, I'd have loved to have been like a sports broadcaster, a baseball player, a radio DJ, but I'd also love to be a weather person. I am infatuated by weather. I love it. And I also asked him about touring the National Weather Service because we actually live so close now that if I go to the top of our hill in our subdivision, I can see the St. Louis National Weather Service radar dome. That's how close we are. So like when I look at the radar on radar scope on that app, the little, you know, where the dead spot is, because that's where the radar sits, that's basically my house because that's how close we are to the radar spot, which I think is very, very cool. All right, so that's a little rattling for this week. Oh, shall we speak of Marathon Weekend 2023 registrations, or shall we not? That's right. That was a mess on Tuesday, but I hope you got the distances you were looking for. If you don't, I don't know why, but I keep having this stinking feeling that they're going to open up more slots at some point. I talked about this on the phone with Scott last night. We had a discussion because we're going to record a podcast this evening, by the way. If you want to hang out, it's going to be later tonight. If you're getting the show right away, Thursday night. I can't imagine the entire weekend sold out that quickly. Like every distance sold out in like an hour. And Dopey Challenge sold out in 21 minutes. It's pretty unbelievable. I can see how the servers could have got flooded like they did because I know that everybody's kind of learning how to play the game at this point. I had 3 windows open. Everybody probably had at least 3 windows open. I know some people said they had 6, 7, 8 devices. So when you had that happen initially, that flood crashed the servers. But even if I had 8 devices open, I'm probably not registering 8 people. I'm probably just going to register 1 or 2. So I don't know. Like, I just can't imagine that many slots. And I would imagine they're also going to run in 23 at this point at full capacity, which Marathon Weekend has huge fields for the races. I don't know. So I wouldn't say all hope is lost. Or again, you can look at charity bibs, which is a good option. You know, that it comes where you get to do your races and also charity gets to raise some money. So it's kind of a win-win there. That's how I ran the 10K for Give Kids the World. So I would look that route, but please don't give up hope. And it does make me feel guilty. And I've seen this time and time again. I should think this is why the Lizards and other folks are such great people in the running community, is that while I am excited to get to run another Dopey, this will be Dopey 7 for me, if God willing, if everything's okay in January, which is a long way off. I do feel bad that some of my friends did not get in, some of my good friends. And I hope it does work out. There's still lots of time for things to happen, but it does make you, it does kind of, take the glimmer off the celebration when everybody else, there's a few people that are not happy. So let's hope it all works out for all of us so we can have a fun time, all of us together in January. So let's hope. All right. So let's get to the feedback from last week's show. Last week, I kind of talked about some of my fun teaching memories, some stuff that I did that I really miss, especially this time of year, because this time of the year, you get to state testing. I used to like that because I always thought my kids were always prepared. Whether they were or not, I don't know. Maybe I was just very optimistic, but I always thought that they were going to kill the state test. And we always did pretty well in the state testing. I always kind of thought as a teacher that I did the best I could to teach all the concepts that I was required to teach to my kids, but mostly I was a coach. I would get them pumped up for the test. I would have them believing in themselves. I would let them know that I was in their corner and that I would have them mentally and just physically and everything prepared for that test. They were going to be as ready for that test as any sixth grader at Wedgwood Elementary had ever been. And I was going to make sure that was my job. I shouldn't get a check unless I had them ready for that check or that test. And I think they always were. And then we'd celebrate after the test. We'd have a good time as long as everybody gave an honest effort, and everybody seemed to do that back in the day. I don't know how it's been since 2017 when I got out of teaching, but we kind of celebrated it because, it's good when you're prepared to do a task. Like when it gets time for a race, now that I've switched to running, about 10 years ago, when I go to a race, I don't get nervous in the corrals anymore because I know that I've done the work on random Tuesday mornings and random Thursday mornings and random Saturday mornings. I've put in the work on that treadmill. I've put in the miles. So why would I worry when I get to the race? This is the fun time. This is where I get to show what the work leads to. And that's what I told my students, right? If you were there on, any day in September, any day in November, you sat in my class in January when it was crazy boring, but we were learning how to go over prime factorization. They were then ready to smoke that test when time came, and they were going to show off, and they're going to get killer great scores the next year, but they had to do it that day. And we did it. And that's why I love testing. And testing was fine with me. And, I love these little times of the year where we got to kind of show off at the end of the year, then have celebrations, go roller skating and go to the park and, have all the good stuff. Okay, let's get to the feedback. Francesca, thank you so very much for being a patron. She says, Mike, why your teacher stories have me laughing out loud and feeling bad for you at the same time. That's right. I forgot. I talked about passing out into my front yard when I took my second graders to Fritz's Frozen Custard. And my buddy Dave came behind me and said, just don't look at him. Just keep moving, first graders. And I'm like, Dave, it's Mike. I passed out. Anyway, I can tell you this. Those kids were lucky to have a teacher like you. I never got an ice cream run at school, nor did I ever have a class pet. Sounds like great memories. Thanks so much. They probably did never have a teacher like me, and I don't know that they should have, but I did love those kids. And I think we learned a lot. Teaching second grade, I learned was not for me. I like sixth grade. But when you're a new teacher and they say, do you want to teach? And they just throw in a grade, you say yes, because I needed to check and I needed to get experience. And I learned a ton from those second graders because when you're in a grade at a primary grade where you're teaching reading a lot, because sixth graders for the most part knew how to read, it was more remediation. But when you're actually teaching emerging readers in second grade, it's exhausting, but it's also magical. When you see a kid learn it, you can see it in their eyes. Like when it finally clicks for them that they can learn how to read, they're going to read for the rest of their life. Like that is a skill they're going to have forever. And it's going to be something they use every hour of every day of their life. And it's going to affect the quality of it makes me I want to get you fired up to become a teacher. Don't do it. Teaching is so hard and you don't get paid enough. Don't go into teaching right now. But I will tell you what, it is the best job ever because you get that feeling in your heart you've changed a life. And especially the primary teachers. I always said, and I don't know if there's any kindergarten teachers in our audience. Kindergarten teachers should get a blank check. They should be like, okay, you're hired. Fill out how much you want to get paid. Because when I taught sixth grade and I saw those kindergarten classes going down the hall, I was like, oh my goodness. I don't know how they do it. Like, seriously, how do you deal with 36 6-year-olds that all have a mind of their own? Like, how do you even get from your classroom to music without losing a kid? And you're supposed to teach them how to read, how to tie their shoes, how to not punch each other. I don't get it. Kindergarten teachers should be getting paid more than baseball players. It's nuts. Anyway, Trisha's here. She's down at Walt Disney World right now, but she's checking in. I currently have a second grader, and I laughed out loud when you mentioned the number of questions they ask. About 7,294 a day. I'm a registered dietitian, and I work with kids at a hospital. I was preparing a meal with a group of kids, and one of the teens burned bacon, setting off the fire alarm for the entire hospital. After everyone had filed back inside and the fire department left, I had to fill out an incident report. Not my best day. Well, hey, I got to say this, Trisha. At least it was bacon. You're a good dietitian. Any dietitian that lets a kid cook bacon is okay in my book. I like it. That's, but you'll never forget that day, right? Like, I'll never forget the tree behind Crest Bowl at that random house. I can find the house right now because I can remember the tree. And I guarantee you those kids, those kids are they're out of college now. They probably have kids of their own. I'm so old. But they're probably talking about Mr. Allman, the second grade teacher that came in after Christmas and lost the hamster and took us to Fritz's and passed out. I guarantee you. Dennis Keithley, let's go Blues down in Texas. My good buddy says, I've never been a teacher, but I used to volunteer for the Watch Dogs, which is dads of great students at the elementary school my boys attended. If you aren't familiar with it, it is a program where dads volunteer and spend the day at school helping teachers and interacting with the students. Every time I volunteered, I'd come home exhausted. I don't know how teachers do it. Splitting my attention 6 to 20 ways all day long just wore me out. Hats off to the teachers out there. Let me tell you what, Dennis, hats off to anybody who gives of their time to help the teachers. That is, with the fact that you were up there giving that teacher a hand, God bless you. Because again, the teachers sign up for it. The teachers go to college for it. The teachers are paid for it. And still hats off to the teachers. Don't get me wrong. My wife comes home with stories you would not believe each and every day, especially now, because where my wife teaches, again, it's where I used to teach. It's here in Ferguson. She still teaches in Ferguson, Missouri. It's tough. They do not get substitute teachers anymore, ever. Nobody will go there. Nobody will substitute teach there. So when somebody is out, my wife will have 40, 42, 45 kids in her class, because what they do is they just split the kids for the teacher that is out. So she'll get a third of this class or half of that class along with her entire class. It's crazy. So teachers, you absolutely are the angels. You're doing it, but the volunteers out there that, not just volunteers that help teachers, but volunteers at dog pounds or, pet adoption places or senior centers or after school volunteerism is amazing. So Dennis, thank you for doing that. I wish I could have had you in my class. We'd have both been exhausted and we'd have gone and got a drink afterwards, I think, or something. We'd have had to share some stories after that. John Conlon, I was just talking to John today. I just added a day to his tickets because his flights got changed. He got to stay a little bit longer at Walt Disney World in August. That's pretty sweet. He says, I'm a high school math teacher now, but I did a lot of substitute teaching when I was in school going for my master's degree. Once I agreed to substitute first grade. I made it through the whole day unscathed until they started to make bus announcements at the end of the day. That's when one of the kids threw up just as their bus got called. I was a clueless 24-year-old at the same time, so thanks very much to that experienced teacher next door who got the kid to the nurse and got the custodian to clean up the mess. Okay, so just that's a little TMI for me here, but the call on the intercom system at Wedgwood Elementary was, Miss Margie, we need a pixie dust to room 135. A little pixie dust at 135. Fortunately, we never got that call because, again, I talked about this, I think. The one rule I had from the 5 minutes the year started with my kids was, if you ever thought you were going to get sick, you never, ever raised your hand. You didn't even think about it. You ran directly to the nearest restroom. I have a terrible gag reflex, and just reading this email is almost making me sick. But thanks, John. But I appreciate that you're a patron, and thank you for being a teacher. But your message here is about to get me sick. But my rule was, you never, ever throw up in Mr. Rallman's room. If you even think it's a possibility that it could happen 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, you get out of my room, you go to the bathroom, We will send somebody to check on you. You do not raise your hand and ask, Mr. Rahman, I feel sick? No, that does not happen in this situation. You just go. If I see you get up and just run to the bathroom, I'm assuming you're going to get sick. And I will send somebody to make sure that you are going to be healthy and that you're going to make it through. But you do not ask. If you ask that you got to go to the bathroom because you're going to get sick, you're going to get in trouble for that, because that's not how it works in Mr. Rahman's room. Rahman's room, if you're going to throw up, and the thing was too, they knew, if you try to play me on this, there will be consequences. But this is not negotiable. You just you tear out. You just get out if you're going to get sick, because I've seen it. I mean, it happens in elementary schools. But I will say, 17 years of teaching, never had anybody throw up in my class. And now that I'm done teaching, I can say that out loud. There you go. It worked. So teachers, take it, run with it. That's it. Anyway, he says, after that, I never wanted to sub for younger than 5th grade. I'm very happy now teaching grades 10 through 12. Hats off and thank you to the elementary school teachers out there who have to teach kids basically everything. I couldn't do my job if it weren't for you. Thanks, John. We couldn't do our jobs if it weren't for high school teachers, because, well, we have to teach emerging readers and, mathematics literacy. They're a lot meaner when they get to you guys. They know how the world works. They're a lot more devious. So thank you for doing, and the content you teach is incredibly difficult too. So I can't imagine. So it all comes together. But you know what? I'm going to do a show on substitute teaching stories, because I substituted for a long time before I got my first full time. And I have some substitute teaching stories, but I'm not going to do that today because I didn't think about it. But John just gave me a great idea. So thanks, John. All right. Thanks for the feedback. If you have feedback on today's show or any show, I love feedback. I thrive on feedback. Next week, the show is going to come out a little bit earlier. So get it in before Tuesday, please. Before Tuesday, because this time next week, I'll be at Walt Disney World for the Summit Cheerleading Championships. But just swing by patreon.com/Be Our Guest Podcast. All right, let's get to the topic at hand this week. It is dumb little unofficial games that we used to play in the 80s as kids at elementary school to entertain ourselves. And then a couple of games we used to play in gym class that would probably get you a felony warrant if you did this right now, if you were a gym teacher. And again, so I don't know if you know this, but I went to school to be an elementary school teacher, but I entered college wanting to be a physical education teacher. I wanted to be a gym teacher. I mean, imagine that. I love sports. I loved playing sports. I got a baseball scholarship to go to college. I never played baseball because I switched over to speed skating, because at the time, inline speed skating was being toyed with becoming an Olympic sport, and I knew it was an emerging sport. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to try to get to the Olympics as one of the very first in this sport, because it wasn't, not many people knew of it. So it was a great way in. It never did work out that way. I was highly ranked in inline speed skating, but it didn't catch on, because for a sport to make it to the Olympics, a certain number of countries have to approve it. And in the 90s, this was actually going to happen because it was very popular worldwide, but they have to take your federation's whole body. And in roller skating, there's 3 disciplines. There is roller hockey, there was inline speed skating, and there was artistic skating, which is not exactly figure skating. And God bless. Okay, here we go. Stacy from the old TV program on the resort TV at Walt Disney World. What's her last? Stacy Aswad. She is a national champion when it comes to roller artistic skating multiple times. She is a world champion. She has gone to the nationals and she has won in artistic skating in it's called USAC-RS. It's the governing body of roller skating in the United States. She won this many times. So I shouldn't say anything bad about this, but basically what you do is there was kind of like a figure skating thing, but it's not as, you don't do like a lot of like throwing your partner or anything like that. It's more of like a synchronization thing in your skating. But also they have a thing like, if you've ever seen like in an old school roller skating rink, you have to trace basically like a figure 8 without breaking stride and doing it exactly right. Well, that's what Stacy won in. Well, the thing was, most countries accepted inline speed skating and roller hockey. Yes, we want that. Nobody would take artistic skating. And so you had to take all 3. So it never got into the Olympics. So wah. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I want to do. So I want to be a PE teacher, but eventually I figured, God, I want to do something because I had, these people were just like, do you really want to roll out a ball for 30 years? And I kind of thought, yeah, okay, probably. But then people were like, yeah, you should probably teach something. So I thought, okay, I'll teach elementary school because I'm a guy. I do like teaching. It's easy to get a job if you're a guy. There's not a lot of guy elementary school teachers. So I decided to go into that. So I changed my major and, decided to go into elementary school teaching. And so that's how I ended up where I was. So, but let's talk about today's. I don't know how you got on that tangent. This show is so random. This is like the randomest show ever. But let's get back to the topic. So the topic is those weird games we played in elementary school in the 80s. So I thought about this because I heard kids. Actually, I saw something online. I think it was like a BuzzFeed article or something. So I went to a private elementary school in Ferguson, Missouri, and there were only about 25 of us in my class, and there was only one class per grade, so it was like the same kids every year, second to sixth grade. I mean, a few kids swapped out every here and there, but it was almost the same kids. And we played a lot of the same games that I bet you played if you're my age, but maybe not. Maybe it was a Midwestern thing, but maybe not. One of the games was paper footballs. Now, did you play this game? And maybe you did if you were maybe it was a guys girls thing. I don't know. I'm not trying to be like sexist or anything like that, but this is kind of what we did. We had those um we would and I don't even remember for making these because I'm very not artistic or creative or anything like that, but I remember having them. So somebody maybe made them for me. They were like little triangles that were really, really like dense, made out of paper. They were folded a certain way, kind of like just equilateral triangles. And you would just flick them with your finger, and the other guy or gal would hold up their two fingers like goalposts, and you would kick them through, and you got points for that. But you would also kind of slide them on the desk, and the goal was to flick them, and you would try to get it to stop where it hung off the end of the desk. That was a touchdown. And if you got a touchdown, then you kick the extra point. I mean, not a lot to it, but that was one of the games we played was the paper football game. And that was always fun because when you were shooting your extra point, obviously you'd hold up the two fingers, but your face would be kind of in the middle. So if you really wanted to smoke your buddy out, you would kick the extra point and just drill them right in the nose. And those things actually, they were made out of paper, but somehow you'd fold them and they'd be like really dense. And you could cut a guy. You could at least do a little, put a red mark on his nose. But yeah, we'd play that all the time. Because remember, this was like for indoor recess or like when you probably were supposed to be doing like math problems. I don't even know how we got away with this. Another game that we played in elementary school. This also could have been like while we were waiting for the bus, like John said, or stuff like that. We didn't even have a bus at our school. We had carpool, but maybe while waiting for the carpool line, we played pencils. Did you ever play that? So one person, and God, this game, I didn't even have, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I guess everybody had a lot of pencils. Everybody was pencil rich. So you would take a pencil, one person would hold the pencil between the two hands, and another person would take their pencil and just try to break the other guy's pencil. Like you get one shot, and either your pencil would break, you're holding, or their pencil would break. Stupid game, but I do remember we'd try to break pencils. Dumb. I don't know. Maybe you didn't play that game. Maybe you're smarter than we were. Also, we played slaps. Did you ever play slaps? So one person would sit there and put their hands out with their palms facing the sky. The other person would come up to that person. You'd be face to face, and you would put your hands on top of their hands with your hands on top of theirs with your fingers, your palms facing down to where your hands are right above their hands. And then the person on the bottom would have to real quick flip over and try to slap that person. And if you got them, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. But if you miss, then you switch. And then the other person got to slap that person. And I mean, this game got ugly because like sometimes you just be like whacking the other person. I don't even know what the goal of this game was other than pain. And that reminds me of another game. We played Knuckles, where you would just kind of hit the other guy's knuckles until like, I mean, they would turn red. Sometimes they would, like you get scuffs on them. The games we played at elementary school were just brutal. I mean, now that I think about it, I don't like, dude, there's no way these games happen in 2022. There is absolutely no way. The sad thing is, I probably let my kids play these games when I first used to teach sixth grade, like in 1999. My kids probably play these games, and I probably didn't even say a word about it because it was just fun. But I mean, like, God, now that I look at it, like 20 years later, I guess society's changed. Maybe I've changed. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a parent now. Maybe I'm soft. I don't know. Okay, but another game that we used to play. Okay, now this one took a little bit of yeah, this was actually an organized game at recess. And again, my elementary school did not have a gymnasium because we were a church school. We did build a gym in sixth grade. We had a big fundraiser. Like in fourth grade, we raised money. We sold pizzas in fourth, fifth, sixth. Finally, in sixth grade, it got finished. We had a gym because I went all the way to high school. I moved after sixth grade, so I didn't go there. But we finally did get a gym. But we had a wall where we'd have outdoor recess, like on a blacktop. And we had a wall, and the game we always used to play, I remember it was called, and pardon my French here, but it was called Butts Up. And so the way this game would work, there'd be like 4 or 5 people that would play this game. And I was a baseball player, so I loved it because we'd take a tennis ball, we'd throw it against the wall, and you would just take turns. You would be in a line. So like I would throw the ball against the wall and it would come back, boom, hit one time on the ground, and you would catch it. The next person in line would have to catch it. And if they caught it clean, they would throw it against the wall. And then it would hit the ground, bounce one time, the guy after them would have to catch it. Now the thing was, if it was your turn in the line, the person in front of you throws it and you go to catch it and you don't catch it clean and it hits the ground, like it hits off your hands, and you don't catch it, anybody can grab that ball. And what happens is if you don't catch it clean, you have to hurry up and go tag the wall before somebody drills you with the ball. So if you don't catch it clean, anybody picks up the ball and they have to throw it at you as fast as you can if you fumble it. Now, here's the repercussions if you get hit with the ball on the way to the wall, you don't tag up in time. You had to stand on the wall with both hands on the wall with your butt out in the air, your rear end out in the air, and everybody in the line got a free shot at you from the line. Now, I'm not bragging, but I was a pitcher in elementary school and I could bring it. People did not like it when I got a free shot because I was actually pretty accurate and I brought the heat, and I was pretty unrelenting because I'm a pretty competitive guy. I could split some cheeks. I'm just saying. I mean, I don't know why we played this game. This game was like this would put you in jail right now if I played this game with kids. Like it was, I mean, serious, but I mean, our teachers were like, they were ladies in the church and they watched us play this game for 30 minutes after lunch every day at Ferguson Church of the Nazarene. I don't know what to say. It was crazy. The last game now, this was one that we played in gym class, and I bet you played it in gym class. I'm not sure. When we got the gym, because we only had it for sixth grade because it was brand new, and we were so excited to have a gymnasium. It was awesome. Because before that, we just played in the cafeteria, which was just a room in the church. It was like the fellowship hall. But we actually had a gym in sixth grade. It finally got done. And we played bombardment. Now, did you ever play bombardment in sixth grade? So, or in elementary school? Basically, all this was, and I'm sure you did. I don't know if I don't think they play this anymore. I doubt it. But you would just divide up 2 teams and you would just fire these playground balls and those red rubber playground balls. But we didn't just have red rubber playground balls like the big ones. We had like small softball size, like cannonball sized ones. And the thing was, again, I was a baseball player and I played a ton of baseball. I could get those small ones and I could almost kill people in sixth grade by then because I was tall. I was big and I played, like I said, I was a pitcher. I could bring that thing and just, I mean, you could hear it coming at you and it would hit some of these. And the thing was, and I know this is sad, but I mean, this is why you can't do this anymore because some kids are athletic and some kids are not. And it didn't matter. They just threw all 30 of us out there on the court and balls were flying. And I mean, it was like a war. It was crazy. So right or wrong, here's what I want to know. Cause again, we're at the 40-minute mark and I got to get out of here. I don't want to make these shows longer than the podcast. They're always supposed to be mini. And I'm doing terrible at the mini thing. I'm trying to keep them to 20 minutes and I'm doubling them every week. But here's what I want on the feedback. What kind of things did you do in elementary school that when you look back, you're like, I can't believe it. Like when I look back at this, if if I drove past an elementary school right now and I saw a game of Butts Up, one, I'd be like, wow, that's retro. That's pretty cool. I mean, they're doing that game. Then I'd be like, I can't believe it. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to have to go to the hospital. And the fact that none of us ever did that I know, I don't think anybody ever really got hurt seriously, but I'd be a nervous wreck. Is it that I've turned into an old man? Where am I? How did this happen? What are your thoughts on these old games? Patreon.com/Be Our Guest Podcast. I hope we shared some laughs. I hope I didn't offend anybody. That was just the 80s in Missouri. That's what we did. I want to know what you did in your quarter of the world. How did you grow up? What games did you play that were your unofficial games that were just kind of crazy looking back? Let me know. And until then, I'll catch you on the socials. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon.